Hi.
Hi, Samina. You can hear me?
Yes, I can. Just waiting. Join us. More all the speakers to connect.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So this is the Magic Center for the Arts in Childhood, and we're going to be doing an Instagram live on the podcast. The last year, which ran from August, December.
Samina, your
Yeah.
voice is breaking up quite a
Is
lot.
it? Oh,
Yes.
oh, just check my.
That's better now.
That. Is this any better?
Yes.
Yes, it's
Huh?
better. Yes.
So, please, I'll just send her another invite and we will begin. Here we are, all of us. So, I hope we're all audible. I think we can begin now. Some
Yeah.
people have joined.
I can see Nandini, but
Can you see? You can't see Nandini. Perhaps
yeah, I
there's
can
a
see.
maybe it will take
Okay,
some
okay.
time to come.
Okay,
But
okay.
I can.
I can see you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, welcome everybody, and welcome to our listeners, viewers who have joined us. So, as I said, this is an Instagram live by the Magic Center for the Arts in Childhood, and we're going to be talking about the Hindustani Poetry podcast that ran from August to December 2023. It was a limited series podcast in Hindi and English. For those of you who don't know, the podcast emerged from a multimedia education research project for TESF India on children and citizenship. As part of that project, workshops were held with a select small group of children in 3 sites across India. And they created art and they wrote some poetry in response to the ideas of citizenship, in particular, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Um, we some of the select poems from that were selected to create this podcast. So it is actually children's voices on these ideas, and each episode of the podcast had a guest. The guests came from diverse backgrounds. There were poets, writers, artists, educators, and the idea of the guest responding to that poem in the podcast is, in a way, it's like mirroring what we hope, what we believe that adults need to do everywhere, which is to listen to children and respond to their lived realities. So we've been actually really delighted with the kind of response that we've received with the podcast. I know that teachers have written in to say that they are planning to use it in classrooms. I know that parents have been playing it as they drive their children to school. So it's lovely to see that art that gets created in a collaborative way can also be then received in a kind of collaborative way. Um, so we wanted to be able to look back on the learnings from the podcast, and because it finished at the end of the year and it was holiday time, we held off. And now, on the occasion of Republic Day, it seems fitting to look back on these ideas and to see what we have learned from listening to the children and in the course of making this project. So to do that today, we've got three wonderful speakers, one of whom seems to have dropped off right now, but hopefully will be back. But I'll begin by just introducing our three speakers. I'm going to just read the bios. So first off, we have Dr. Shalini Advani. She's on the governing body of the Pathways School and one of the 16 global commissioners of NEASC, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. Previously, she was the founder director of Pathways School Noida, and she was also a much loved teacher. She has been one. She has a special interest in how young people can engage with issues of social justice and inequality. Her publications include newspaper articles on education, the books Growing Up in the Nuclear Shadow and Educating the National Imagination, as well as the essay Childhood Sexuality, History, Memory, Mythology. Bihu Anand, who has dropped out and I hope will be back soon, is a special guest today because she is the voice of the young person. She's a homeschool student. She's currently completing her grade 12 from the National Institute of Open Schooling. She's done her elementary schooling from an alternative school, Anand Niketan. And she is an artist herself. She writes poems and is a ceramic artist. And finally, we have Nandini Chandra, an associate professor in the Department of English at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. Her book, The Classic Popular, Amar Chitra Katha, was 1967 to 2007, was published by Yoda Press in 2008. Besides comics, she's published widely on the history of childhood, Hindi print culture, minor genres, and the neoliberal university. So thank you all for agreeing to be here. And we'll begin by, it would be nice if you all could respond to the podcast on, what you have felt while listening to the poems that the children have written and, of course, other things in the podcast. So may I invite, Shalini, may I invite you to go first?
Yeah. All right. So thank you, Samina, and thank you for allowing me to talk more publicly about this very important podcast. I also found it really, really moving to listen to the different sessions and listen to the children's work. So I'm going to talk about three different things, I think. One is to begin with just the structure. It was such a wonderful thing to have poetry. And I'm assuming that this was your idea, but what poetry does is that it frees up children's voices. It frees them from syntax and structure in a way that prose does not. And of course, poetry is so evocative. It touches emotions in a different way. I mean, I was so many lines. I like the one of where this child says, "In the home of my dreams, there will be freedom to speak, to play, to think." And those three words, to speak, to play, to think, it really rounds up and summarizes so much of what is integral to the notion of freedom and the notion of equality. And along with that, I loved the fact that you did a commentary along with your guests, because it sort of teased out the ideas, it unpacked the ideas, it helped us as audience to think about many of the things that resonate, and you put your finger on a lot of very important aspects on that. So one was on the structure. The other was, these are such big ideas. The idea of fraternity and equality. And these poems remind us that these things lie in the everyday and in personal experiences. A lot of the examples were from schools, inevitably, since they're children, and that is the context of children. And in fact, context is of course crucial, because it's only through context that we understand the importance of lived experiences as a political process. So in episode 5, for instance, which was one I really liked, which is about feeling what is feeling equal and unequal. The girl says, inequality is when Sir does not let girls up on stage, or other children saying, "Don't talk to her, she's from a lower caste." And this is how gender and caste equalities are experienced.
Yes.
And what was nice was the upbeat bits, the that equality is hoisting the flag together on Independence Day. Or what I loved was getting the same marks as your friend. I mean, just the personalization of so many of these things, I think was very touching, but it was also important in the message that it gives us about how these things need to be thought about. And finally, as an educator, it really made me think about how we teach things like freedom or equality in schools. Schools are very hierarchical traditionally. All the power lies with the adults and with teachers. And we teach them out of textbooks, chapters on equality or on freedom. And these are very virtuous lessons, but they don't really, I don't think, shape and impact young people. But impact and learning of these things has to come through the experience of schooling. And schools really need to give agency and voice to children. If you value areas like freedom and justice, you have to give space for children's opinions on what they like and what they don't like, maybe about something they're reading or something that they're learning. You have to give them choice on what to work on. Not everybody wants to work on exactly the same things, and learning need not be related to the same context. Children should have a voice in how they are assessed, or decision making in the rules of the school. So only then do you really have a lived experience of all of these really important essential ideas. And there is something very nice on the day before Republic Day to be reflecting on these, both as an educator and just as somebody who enjoyed listening. So I'm going to stop now.
Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah, it would be so wonderful if our schools could make place for this the kind of vision that you have laid out. It would be so wonderful if that could happen across public and private schools. Thank you so much. Bihu, glad to see that we sorted out the network issue. So should we, before the network lets us down
Can
again,
you
should
hear me properly?
yes, I can. I can.
So, मतलब I'm going to say in mixed like Hindi English both. So I hope it's not a problem. So I felt really good listening. Like kids are doing these questioning and they are aware about the situation around them, and they are able to see that there is inequality. There is something which is not actually uh, something we can call साधारण नहीं है, क्योंकि इनइक्वालिटी साधारण नहीं है. तो I'm good. Like I feel good कि they're questioning it, they're asking question, they're pointing that out. And I think this kind of project is important because then only we can like grow into active citizens, to know that when we'll know our rights, our values, then only we can grow into active citizens. एंड ऑल्सो आई फील कि ये सिर्फ मतलब हर ग्रुप के बच्चों के साथ ये होना चाहिए. मतलब हर सोशल, हर कल्चरल ग्रुप के बच्चों के साथ ये होना चाहिए. इवन प्रिविलेज किड्स के साथ भी होना चाहिए. सो एवरीवन कैन नो their their rights, their these constitutional values. Because as a privileged kid, I sometimes feel that I don't question that much because I don't struggle in that way. Because like for that जो a poem है, that episode जिसमें a wish for equality, that for that girl not being able to enter hotel Taj is a sign of inequality, but I can't point that out ever क्योंकि मेरे लिए कभी वो उस जैसा है ही नहीं कि तो मैं उस चीज को उस तरीके से क्वेश्चन नहीं करूंगी. तो being able to see and to feel, so yeah, I feel these kind of projects are equally important, and yeah, that's my point.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Bihu. Nandini, may I now request you?
Yeah, I must congratulate you, Samina, because Hum Hindustani kind of is very much part of the public arts kind of project, which is missing from in this day and age in most national cultures. Like it was something that began in the late second half of the 20th century, and so this. What you do with the kind of collective voices of children and across different locations is like, I feel it's really, really significant. So I wanted to talk a little bit about like why it's significant, why this project is so significant. And for that, I want to start with this whole notion of freedom, because like one typically assumes that a love of freedom is something almost intrinsic to all of us, and children particularly are associated with the love of freedom. Like they're free birds, and they're free, and so I want to bring in this British post-war child psychoanalyst, Donald Winnicott, who actually challenges or contests this idea of the intrinsic love of freedom. In fact, he says that rather we are afraid of freedom. Like that is the more primary feeling. Rather than loving freedom, we are actually terrified of freedom, and we don't want freedom. And the reason he cites is that it's the sensation of being free is something which is like is equivalent to being cut loose from the mother's body, from the maternal body, or it's equal to being separated and alone. And it does not give a sense of physical gratification. And so this idea that children are free is also a form of obfuscation. So in some ways, this love of freedom constitutes two different types of kind of obscuring. One is that, of course, it's obscuring the fact that we are actually afraid of freedom. And the second is that that children are free. Because what it obscures there is that the phase of childhood is actually the time of the greatest vulnerability and dependence. And so what I liked about Hum Hindustani is that it's able to capture voices that showcase these contradictions. And the children are acutely aware of the kind of unfreedoms that are encased within those freedoms that are granted to them. And so, especially in podcast 3, I was thinking like, where the child kind of hints at the mechanical nature of the freedoms granted to them. For example, he or she, they say that बात करने की आज़ादी है पर ज़्यादा बात करने की आज़ादी नहीं है. Or they say that खेलने की आज़ादी है पर मस्ती की आज़ादी नहीं है. So in that sense, like the essence of freedom is missing. And so these gaps become very, very critical, and between the idealized notions of freedom that are projected onto them and the reality of it. And also, like, I wanted to mention that the very fact I really loved your prompts, like बराबरी का एहसास or the क्योंकि इसीलिए और ये क्या ये मेरे लोग हैं. And so, like, when so it prompts the children, like both Shalini and you have said, like, to ask radical kind of questions. For example, the child says that जिन्होंने मस्जिद तोड़ा है वे क्या मेरे लोग हैं. I mean, you can't have a more radical question, which is not about identity but about non-identity. Like, and then, like, finally, my favorite kind of podcast was the last one, where the child is asking, just saying that मुझे दुबई घूमने की आज़ादी चाहिए और महंगे कपड़े खरीदने की आज़ादी. So these are not your typical azadis, and this is something that would scare a parent or a progressive educationist, because it like borders on consumerism. But that's the thing about freedoms, like, you can't police the boundaries, and children are, then sussing out those gaps, like, so if once you let loose the kind of balloon of freedom, then it's going to burst, it's going to open up wide horizons. And so I think that's the beauty of the podcast. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Nandini. Yeah, it's really true that, when particularly in there are a couple of collective poems in which I've sort of, there were single line exercises and I have gathered them together to form the poem for the episode. You see this, the contradiction that for someone, ghar is a space of feeling free, पर किसी और के लिए नहीं है वहां वो आजादी, because of the particular constraint of the particular context of the home. So that idea of, that both the individual experience of freedom, and also that because though they may be diverse, those individual experiences and the individual ways in which the desire manifests, that is there. But at the same time, that there is a kind of universal freedom that we must, like, all sort of the universal idea, not like a universal freedom actually, but a universal idea that of everybody being free, of human beings being free. And so of course that would mean that they will be free to make choices that can be scary for adults. Yeah. And I think that thing that for us as adults to listen and then to see, like, how should we be responding actually, and it actually, I think, makes us question our own responses and our perspective on those things, to like reimagine that and to maybe rethink those things. Yeah. So thank you all so much, all three of you. I was wondering that, I mean, I know there are some comments that have come in, but I thought perhaps you might have a question for me about the podcast, or about the making of the podcast, or just, the children. So I would be very happy to answer any of those questions.
Yeah. So, there's one thing that I was wondering about, because you had a variety of children from private schools and public schools. I don't know what variation there was in terms of privilege, but did you find any different ways in which they engage with these ideas based on class?
Yeah.
Or was it, they're all children
Yeah.
and there's a certain commonality?
No, so I think there's a bit of both. Of course, there is something which is common to all children, just as it is, I think, common to all human beings. But definitely, I think that there are differences. So we had private school. The settings that I chose determined a lot of how that experience was. So for children in Punjab, in the villages of Firozpur, there were those who went to private schools, who were, larger landowning families, came from larger landowning families. And then there were those who went to, and some of those were Mazhabi Sikhs, who went to the public school. I think the ways in which the private school children, for example, knew like information about, like just words, for example,
Mm-hmm.
rights, Samvidhan. They knew the words. For the government school children, many of them did not even know that, So this idea of hak, what does that mean? This came up also in Govandi, with one of the children who has written actually one of the poems of Kya wo mere log hai. And in the interview she said to me that, when I asked her, I said hak kya hote hain, and she said hak wo जो लोगों को मिलने चाहिए. So I said कौन कौन लोगों को, तुम्हारे हक हैं? So she said नहीं, मेरे तो हक नहीं है, पर सबके होने चाहिए. So I think that, it comes directly from the context that the child has come from. So, of course, class, I think, plays a very, very big part in that.
Hmm. I noticed there was also something of a rural urban, that child in Firozpur, one child wrote something about when women in cities drive cars.
Yes.
And that was such a stark sort of difference of vision.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for her, I think, and she had sort of, her mother had brought her to the protest sites at the Delhi border 2 or 3 times. So she was actually quite articulate because of that, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So I have question that what made you think that you should run this kind of project? Can you hear me?
I can, yes, yes.
Yeah.
So, it actually started, Bihu, in the germ of it is goes back to 2019-20, when the anti-CA protests were on. So when that was going on at that time, I was asked to sort of come to a library in Delhi, the Studio Sabdar Library, where I've gone sometimes and I read my work. And when they asked me at that time, I thought, instead of just reading a story that I've written from a book or something, why don't I do something which is around what's going on and to talk to them and I also wanted to kind of, I think, find out what they were thinking, because it was all around them, no, all this was going on. So the second episode where the poem Because Kyunki, that exercise, I actually did that exercise for the first time there. And that the responses from that, then it just became something that I thought, okay, let's try it with other groups of children. फिर कोरोना हो गया, पैंडेमिक हो गया, एंड ऑनलाइन फिर हमने ना 2-3 लाइब्रेरीज के साथ किया था, एंड वी काइंड ऑफ do that. So there's a page on Facebook called We the Children of India, jisme a lot of these poems are there. So this thing was in my head that that are we talking enough to children about it? Are we actually listening to their experiences of things? Because we are talking about these big ideas, but are we including them and their perspective? So when the call for the TESF India projects went out, I thought that I could turn it into something bigger and explore it in a little bit more depth. And that's how the project came together, because I thought I should, because of what was going on in the world, and because I thought I should ask children what they think of what's going on in the world. And then because I listened to what they had to say, and I thought it's very valuable because we are not listening enough to them. So that's really why I thought the project is important. Some of which I feel when I hear you all talk, I feel some of it has translated.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this thing that you're saying about we've got to ask children what they think about what's happening in the world happens so little. I mean, at home, parents don't have those sort of conversations. In schools, they don't. And yet, as you know, your whole podcast shows, it's so crucial, and children have such strong views of their own.
Yeah, I wanted to, as you're speaking, as I'm listening to you, I get a very strong sense of your understanding of these individual children. Like this child whose mother brought him or brought her twice to the Bhiwandi border, or that child in Bombay. And somehow, I mean, I really like the fact that you culled the lines from, their different voices and, created like a collective plural voice, a plural child, which is very essential, like a kind of evocative of something universal. But I also miss that sense that you possess, because you know the children individually, and like, a little bit about their context, their biographies. And I understand that it might be because of some ethical considerations, but I was wondering if you could speak more to the tension between the individual and the universal child. Yeah.
So, one of the things is that the children who wrote the poems, they're anonymous. We have not named them, and that has emerged from because of the, the sort of research ethics protocols that had to conform to. So the recommendation was that we should keep them anonymous, basically for, I think, issues of sort of safety and security for the family. And I can understand because one of the I would ask. So when I went to get consent from the parents and guardians, I would always ask that, are you okay with the name being used, or are you not? And one family in the Shahinbag area did, and this is not it was a kind of middle class family, and so they did want the names remain anonymous. So the recommendation then was that I should just keep that anonymous. So that's one thing that I think when you have a name for a child, and because I think in most of the episodes I've tried to bring the context in, so that for the paternalism and where that without naming the child. But I know that there's a character that gets created when you have the name, and okay, Samina lives in such and such a place, and her family and all this. So you start to imagine that character, and I think is missing. This is something I don't know, like it's not an easy thing, and as you said, there's a tension, because while on the one hand it is important that we maintain the privacy and safety and security of participants in such research, but also on the and sometimes for some things like this, families and children themselves may want to be credited also, for that expression. So that is, it's something I think, we have to, I don't think that this can be, I think it's a kind of case by case thing that we need to kind of test that. There can't be like a one size fits all rule for that.
Yeah.
The other thing, sorry, Samina, about the names, just to think about is names are also markers of, of religion, of sometimes of caste. So, so that is also something to think about. I mean, what Nandini was talking about, the universal element.
Absolutely.
To lose some of that might change the whole meaning in a different way.
Yes. So I've tried to, in the commentary, bring that in, but you do lose that a bit, But having said that, so what I think I tried was for this balance between the individual, so that particular subjectivity, as well as there are, I think, 2 episodes, maybe 3 such poems in which I've kind of culled and created a kind of collective poem. Like say the last episode is a collection of voices drawn from single line exercises that we did, and I think one of the reasons for me to do that was also to point towards this idea that while we are all so very different, there is at the same time something which is common, that there is a humanity that is common to all of us. And that comes also from everyday experiences, So I think I wanted also to point towards that. So we may want to be free in different ways, but we will want freedom, or we may not all want freedom, as Winnicott has said, but it may be in different ways, So or the idea of fraternity, like how do we feel that sense of ye apnapan and ye mere log hain, that can be different, but we do want to feel that sense sense of fraternity, that we belong with a certain, like where we feel comfortable and safe to be able to be ourselves in the way that we understand ourselves. वो भी बदलता रहता है. It is not a fixed thing, the being. But I think that. So it was like these two things. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if we have questions, and is there were some comments, but I can't see them. Guys, if anybody's here and you have a question, would you put it in as a comment? I can't seem to. So this is my very first Instagram live. So bear with us. If you have sent us some comments and I have not been able to share them with the speakers, that's completely. Bihu, would you like to kind of like just tell us how the experience of being in school and then being out of school, the ideas that you have also responded to, and the ideas that the podcast is hoping that we all think about. So, from your experience, like how much place is there within schools, and then when you have been doing homeschooling, how has that? Is there a difference? What is that difference?
So I I studied in an alternative school called Anand Niketan Democratic School. तो उसके नाम में ही डेमोक्रेटिक लगा हुआ था. तो I studied there for 8 years. तो that was the best experience I ever had. So उसमें we used to like everything used to go according to constitutional values and as per constitution. So जैसा होना चाहिए देश में उसका एक छोटा रेप्लिका था वो कि कैसा होना चाहिए स्कूल में भी. तो everyone were equal. We were able. There was no hierarchy between teacher and children. But when I came to another school, that was a formal school. So I saw there is a lot of hierarchy. वो पूरा system inequality पे चलता है. वहाँ पे आपको ना तो access है ना तो democracy है. वो पेस में constitutional values भी छूट जाती हैं और उसपे सब कुछ छूटता ही जाता है. तो वो तो एक मतलब मेरे लिए तो वो नाइटमेयर था. बट होम स्कूलिंग में आई डोंट थिंक उतना इस सब के साथ जुड़ पाता है, पर इसमें एक अपनी पेस होती है. तो अपने से जो ग्रैब कर सकते हो, जो आप अपने से समझ सकते हो, उसको लेके मतलब होम स्कूलिंग में बेहतर रहता है, पर उतना बेहतर भी नहीं रहता है, लेकिन ठीक है, मैनेजेबल बेहतर रहता है.
One of the things that मुझे लगा है while doing this project is that schools, of course, it's important and we have to kind of so that's why I'm really happy when teachers say that they are planning to use the podcast. So I think the school space is important, the classroom space is important. पर मुझे ये बहुत लगा है कि हमें स्कूल के बाहर जगहों में भी काम करना है. ये जो conversations हैं स्कूल के बाहर, and it is like sort of in the everyday, there are different moments and different kinds of interactions जिसमें हमें ये करना है. I think ये जरूरी है. Dr. Rani, there are some comments for you about how they are responding to what you have said and said excellent contributions, etc. And there is a question.
I've seen one question from Shalini Mehta. Yes. I think that's for you, Samina.
Yes, I think so. Did the reflect ideologies of parents and household in their creative work? Okay, so I think, I don't know if I can say very specifically that, what has come from the parent, what has come from the domestic space. But I think believe that whatever is the context of the child, that shows itself, in the work. So, for example, there was one of the child actually who wrote that Kya wo mere, one of the Kya wo mere log hain poems, because she has written in that also कि जो लोग मेरे मस्जिद तोड़ते हैं क्या वो मेरे लोग हैं, and she had done one more artwork. And if you go to our website hum-hindustani.in, you can see all the artwork and all the poetry there. So her artwork was in the prompt of equality. I said, just whatever experience of equality, inequality from your life, it could be something you have experienced, it could be something you have witnessed. So they had to draw something. So she created this drawing of because at that time the whole Karnataka hijab thing was going on. So she had created this drawing of a school, and there are some children, mainly boys, holding placards saying hijab wale mana hai, and there are like 2 or 3 girls in hijab who are trying to come like from the other side. So I was really curious because she was not a Muslim child. And so I asked, so in the interview, I've asked her about this, that how come she, this has come up repeatedly in her work. And she shared with me that she has grown up with another family, a Muslim family, and the daughter is her best friend, and they sort of are in and out of each other's homes. And so because of that, she has some sense of how things, what things they are responding to, and how those feel difficult for them, and sometimes fearful for them. So she was responding to that. It was not her own experience, but she was witnessing, and as witness, she had brought it into her own work. So yeah, definitely it does.
Yeah, I can see another question.
Two
Yes.
more questions,
Yeah.
actually. Yeah.
Uh,
Hi, Prachi. Lovely to have you
from
here. Did the creative process reflect the hyper nationalism which we see around us? Uh, so I think obviously hyper nationalism comes through as a context. I'm not sure what you mean when you say that the creative process reflected. I mean, in the work that the children produce, of course, this idea of what is going on comes, this idea, because especially with the children in Shaheen Bagh, one of the exercises was about remembering what it was like, because they had all been there, So this context of, being sort of excluded. So there's one of the artwork was a child from Shaheen Bagh who has done, made a kind of a bunch of balloons. So it was on freedom. She made a bunch of balloons. They were to just think of a metaphor for freedom, and then they were to write a single line on why that metaphor. So she's made this bunch of balloons, and her line was, I want freedom to be able to burst like a balloon when friends say racist things. So that came because then in the interview, she has responded that she was going to a private school in across the river in Noida. And of course, we've heard these stories of Muslim children being bullied in schools, and that it's not a new thing, but it was her experience of that. And particularly when the protest started, she really felt very stifled. And when I said, were you able to speak to your teachers about it? So she said there was no point, and I didn't. And she said, I also didn't bring it up at home. I think often they don't, because you think, oh, parents will get worried, or they will not allow me to go to school for various reasons. So she had never really spoken about it, So that's an example, I think, of that hyper nationalistic context, which is exclusive rather than inclusive, and what that does to children. But I think at the same time, what for me was really important is that even though there was the opportunity to share that experience and to form that self-expression, I think for me, the project has also made place for that, just for me as an adult, to find hope, because so many of the children, like that girl who wrote about, and the masjid and all that, where it is not her it is not affecting her. And I think that there that hope resides at the same time as that like the chance to be critical and offer the critical experience, the two existing simultaneously. So that was really important. There's another question. He says, I agree. In fact, I always thought about having centers where adolescents go for maybe an hour or two to learn other aspects of life other than academic or co-curricular. Akanksha says, how much are these children work is always based on their own understanding of research? How is this not so influenced by adult perspective and shared activities? So I think, of course, that the adult who is conducting the workshop, in which case this was me, of course my perspective comes in. It is, I think, an interplay of subjectivity. It is not an objective thing. But I think that so of course it is like the prompts are, I'm giving the prompts and they are responding to that prompt. I'm setting the kind of scaffolded structure of the exercise. So there is definitely my subjectivity which is in play over there. But I feel that if we acknowledge that this is the context in which the interaction has taken place, I think that the meaning that we glean exists within that context. So we have to be aware that there is an adult subjectivity, but I don't think there's such a thing as a kind of the essence or a pure child's voice, because I think we are all always performing in a classroom. We are always, the teacher is performing, the interaction between the teacher and the student comes out of that interplay of subjectivities, but that doesn't mean that it is of no value, and that doesn't mean that we cannot draw meaning from it. So as long as we can, clearly state what the context was. So here, in fact, I have written about this. There is an essay in Teacher Plus, which talks actually about the "Kya wo mere log hain" exercise in particular. So I've spoken about that in more detail. Yeah.
If I can just add a little bit, I think what is really important is the creation of that space for children. It's not as though children will always have a perspective which is one that promotes inclusivity. They might often say, of course, there's absolute equality. Everybody has opportunity. What are you talking about? But I think that is fine because it gives a space for a kind of conversation and engagement. And if part of freedom is the right to disagree or the right to argue, then that's something that is really very valuable in terms of getting both the adults and the children to sometimes rethink, to slightly reimagine. And so, the creation of this space is, I think, the most important element for me of a lot of this equality and fraternity that's so integral to what you're talking about. There is another comment, which is and question, which is an important one to engage with, Samina.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe this is a question, the one from Stolen Pikachu, about how do we
Yes.
give solace to children.
Yeah.
I think it would be nice if all of you also responded to this, because it's actually a question for everybody, for something for all of us to think about. And maybe this could be our last question. Shalini, you want to go first?
I
How
can't
could you?
read the question. Can you read it for me?
So the comment is, the Taj Hotel line is that Bihu mentioned were incredibly moving. As a facilitator, how does one begin to offer solace to children about the inequality that is everywhere all the time?
Okay, solace. As a facilitator, how does one offer solace? Like, I think children are, I think when it becomes dangerous when we start becoming like solace givers, like, in terms of, because as long as it's not obscuring the inequality, like um, I feel like children, the very fact that the child said this, is observing, like what Bihu also said, like could see the fact of these, that access to places are differential and not equal. I think that itself, that articulation itself has to be appreciated without trying to kind of immediately put some kind of solace giving or sympathy. I think like listening, like you began the whole today's show by saying that, I think what is most important gift that we give our children is listening to them. And I think listening to these critical articulations is more solace than giving solace itself. Yeah.
Um, I think I totally agree with what Nandini says, that one can't give solace. You have to acknowledge. And sometimes, adults try and give solace. And children know that that is fraud. Because children understand that inequality is real. And I think the most valuable thing one can do is to say, okay, so what is it that needs to change? To do something about it. And not necessarily what is it that you can do, that would perhaps be a second question, but just to look at structural inequalities and get them to understand those things, I think is the most valuable next step.
Yeah. Bihu?
So I never been into a situation where I have to do something. So I don't have an answer actually.
No, I think this is a difficult question, and actually, there isn't an answer. I agree. I agree with what you all have said, because I don't think. I think like we can listen. I think listening is the biggest, most important thing. The search for solace, actually, like even for adults, no, like it's an individual thing that we have to find for ourselves. What we can do with our children is to be able to walk together to find the resources that can enable them to find their solace. I think, I'm not sure that other than that we can fix things for children. We cannot fix things for anybody. But having said that, there is another thing that we have to do, which is the larger political thing, and we can have conversations with children about that, what are we doing to be able to, as you said, Shalini, what are we doing to be able to create change? That's something that requires of the adult to be reflexive, to be engaged with the world, to be open to the fact that there are many, many different kinds of lives, and that, our lives and our problems are not like that, cannot become the standard for everybody, and that, I think, is as important as making time and space for children to be able to talk to us. Yeah. And for us then to actually learn, because I think that's been the most valuable thing for me, that how much I have learned by just engaging with this. I'm like rethinking things. What I have written, all the essays that have come out of this project, is because I have listened to the children and they have provoked that thinking. So I'm deeply, deeply grateful for that. Yeah. So it's 10 to 6, I think, and I have taken a lot of your time. So thank you so much, Shalini, particularly, and all of you who have joined, friends, and also lots of, I think, new people. It's so nice to see all of you here, and please do follow the Magic Key handle and check out our website hum-hindustani.in. And the podcast is available on Spotify, on Amazon, on Apple, wherever you get your podcast. It's also on our website. I'd just like to thank a few people before we end this, because the project, I mean, I'm here speaking for the project, but actually there are so many people who have enabled it. So first of all, TSF India, that sort of enabled me to actually go out and do the work. And the podcast has been supported by Rohini Nilikani Philanthropies. So those are the two big people, big institutions that have made this possible. And there are lots of individuals. So Vaka Media that helped to produce the podcast. Thank you very much, Radhika and Menaka. In the research and writing for the scripts, I'd like to thank Riya Kuture, who's a PhD student, and my conversations with her were very, very energizing. Riya, I don't know if you're here, but if you are, then your contribution is really important. And Gautam Subramaniam, who helped in the writing, and he has co-written the scripts with me. Then for the music, the most amazing thing that happened was my sort of encounter with Ishan and his parents. Who Ishan has sung that little refrain which is there in the podcast. So thank you so much, Ishan and Priya and Gaurav, for that. And the music has been done by Shireen, who worked across time zones and really was so open to all the new ideas that I kept saying no, not this, and then we discovered Ishan and did this thing. So thank you so much, Shireen. And for a lovely artwork, Alia Sinha, who created the big poster for the podcast, which has just helped all the rest of the social media, which has been so expertly handled by Seher. Thank you all so very much. I'm deeply grateful. And also to my friend Shikha Sen, who came along and was the scolding, wagging finger every time that I was recording the voiceover. Oh, and most importantly, Ananya Tripathi, who's a drama facilitator, who did a workshop with the children who have recited and we've recorded with. So, which was really important, because I'm not sure that I would have been able to direct the children as well as she did. So that's a whole bunch of people who came together, and most of all, the children who participated and the children who recorded the poems for us. Thank you all so very much. And we'll do more lives, because now I think I've got the hang of it. All right. Thank you,
Okay.
Shalini.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.